The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Robert Mugabe, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Robert Mugabe, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, and I invite His Excellency to address the Assembly.
Your Excellency, Mr. Peter Thompson, the President of the 71st session of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. Let me begin by congratulating you, Ambassador Thompson, on your election to the presidency of the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly. I also extend our deep appreciation to your immediate predecessor, Mr. Morgens Liekentoft, for his able stewardship of this Assembly during the 70th session. Mr. President, we all vividly recall the momentous occasion in September last year when we adopted the ambitious Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030. This Assembly provides us with a unique opportunity to review the measures we have taken thus far at both the international and national levels, in line with our commitment to global socio-economic transformation. We hope that this time around, this agenda will meet better fate. We are encouraged that since September last year, fundamental steps have been and are being taken at various levels to implement Agenda 2030. In this regard, we note the convening of the Global Infrastructure Forum in April this year, the convening of the Multi-Stakeholder Science, Technology and Innovation Forum in June, the launch of the Technology Facilitation Mechanism and the activation of it online platform. We also note the follow-up meetings pertaining to the development of concrete actions for the implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on financing and for development. These activities at the global level have been equally matched at the national level, with virtually all member states reporting preparations to implement this universal agenda. Mr. President, on our part, I'm happy to inform you that we have established national and multi-stakeholder and multi-sector structures to domesticate and implement the 2030 agenda. And we've done that in a coordinated and integrated manner with our National Development Program, the Zimbabwe Agenda for Sustainable Socioeconomic Transformation, in short, ZIMASET. Our task of domesticating Agenda 2030 has been made relatively less challenging in that the vision and aspirations of our national economic blueprint and the global agenda are basically the same. Our biggest impediment to the achievement of the 2030 agenda is the burden of punitive and heinous sanctions imposed against us by some hegemonic and neo-imperialist powers amongst us here. My country, Zimbabwe, is the innocent victim of their spiteful sanctions imposed by the United States and other Western powers. And these countries for some 16 years now have maintained the sanctions on us. As a country, we are being collectively punished for exercising the one primordial principle enshrined in the United Nations Charter, that of sovereign independence. We are being punished for doing what all other nations have done and do, still do, that is, possess, own their natural resources, and listen to the basic interests of their people. Those who have imposed these sanctions would rather have us pander to their interests at the expense of the basic needs of the majority of our people. As long as these economic and financial sanctions remain in place, Zimbabwe's capacity to fully and effectively implement Agenda 2030 will be deeply curtailed. I repeat my call to Britain, Europe, and the United States and their allies to remove the illegal and unjustified sanctions against my country and its people. Let us all be bound by our commitments to Agenda 2030, under which we agreed to eschew sanctions in favor of dialogue. Mr. President, this session of the General Assembly will elect the next Secretary General of our organization. We have witnessed commendable efforts aimed at making the selection process of the next Secretary General inclusive and transparent. The greater involvement of the General Assembly and therefore of the majority of our membership does not, however, mask the opaqueness of the process at the Security Council level. We expect the current experience to lead to a more inclusive and transparent process in the future. Mr. President, for over 20 years, many of us have come to this rostrum, pleading and demanding the reform of the Security Council. Today we are no closer to achieving that goal than we were 20 years ago. This is so in spite of the universal acknowledgement of the injustice, unfairness, and inappropriateness of the current composition of the Security Council. We now have an opportunity in the ongoing negotiations, in the intergovernmental negotiations, to redress this unjustifiable and unjust situation in the interests of a strong and more united organization capable of delivering on its mandate. Mr. President, our common commitment to leaving no one behind demands that we address the plight of people still living under colonialism and its occupation. The people of Palestine have lived under occupation and persecution for over 49 years. It is high time that the United Nations, in particular the Security Council, fulfilled its charter duties and obligations by implementing its resolutions, which include Resolution 181, Resolution 242, and Resolution 338. The two-state solution based on the pre-June 1967 borders should now be pursued within set parameters and set timelines. This is the only way to achieve durable peace in the Middle East. On our own continent, the United Nations is duty-bound by the principle in the Charter to redouble its efforts in ensuring full realization of the right of self-determination for the people of Western Sahara. Agenda 2030 recognizes that sustainable development cannot be achieved without the full realization of the rights of the peoples living under colonial and foreign occupation. We urge the holding of the independence referendum for the Sahrawis without much further delay. Let me conclude by thanking the Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, for the tremendous work he has done during his tenure. We have appreciated his presence at the African Union summits and his visits to Africa as clear testimony to his commitment to and partnership with Africa in advancing the cause of freedom, development, peace, and security. The security of our continent. We particularly applaud the Secretary General's leadership in mobilizing the entire United Nations system and indeed the international community to partner with Africa in stopping and rolling back the Ebola epidemic, which claimed thousands of lives and undermined Africa's socio-economic development. He has indeed been an indefatigable advocate for self-determination and a persistent champion for inclusive development, peace, and the building coalitions to deal with humanitarian and other crises. We wish him well in all his future endeavors, and I'm sure many of us will miss him, especially we of Africa. I want to thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe for the statement just made. And may I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the President.